All right, well, it looks like the majority of folks have logged in. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to University of Puget Sound virtually. My name is Robin Aijian, and I'm the Director of Student Recruitment and a proud alumnus of Puget Sound. I'm so glad you've joined us this evening for the first of our financial aid nights for admitted students. You're here because we've invited you or your student to join this remarkable community, and in the coming months, you're going to have an important decision to make. Now, over the course of the spring, we're going to offer a series of programs in this virtual space to share what really distinguishes this remarkable and transformative education. At Puget Sound, we celebrate the life of the mind, but with real emphasis on hands-on learning, on community engagement, on viewing the world of ideas through their impact on our college community and on the world beyond the borders of our campus. People matter here. Relationships between students, faculty, and staff matter here. The experience of living in this remarkable community is part of the joy and the challenge of this education. In this environment, our challenge in admission is really to figure out how to share that unique spirit with all of you in this virtual space. I think and hope that we're up to the task. In addition to the financial aid nights like this one, we're hosting 5 spotlight events that aim to share student stories, told in their own voices whenever possible, to help you understand what it's like to be a student at Puget Sound and how our students are experiencing this education. Our spotlight events will focus on a range of topics, including identities and intersections, residence life, experiential learning, and food. That's right, food. Be sure not to miss the Taste of Tacoma Spotlight. We hope you can come to all of them or check out the video recording of our first one that focused on student organizations. I'd also encourage you to join us for Choose Puget Sound, which is a comprehensive virtual open house either on March 17 or April 17. More information about all of our virtual programs is available at pugetsound.edu/admission/spotlight series. Now, if you're able to travel or you're already in the Tacoma area, our office is currently open for campus tours and one-on-one appointments with an admission counselor. To schedule a visit to campus, just go to pugetsound.edu/visit. Tonight's conversation is going to focus on financial aid and the process of investing in this education. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping notes. First, closed captioning is available by clicking the closed caption icon at the bottom of your panel. Second, this is a webinar. That means you can see and hear us, but we can't see or hear you. So don't worry about background noise or if you need to get up for a moment. However, we do want to hear from you. We want to make sure to get your questions answered this evening. So we have a team of admission and financial aid counselors behind the scenes who are going to be answering your questions. We'll also take selected questions live and discuss them here for the good of the group. Please be sure to submit your questions in the Q&A feature, not the chat. Finally, this session, like all of our admitted student virtual events, is being recorded and will be posted on our admission events page in case you need to step out early or you want to play back any part of the event at a later date. This evening, we're joined by my colleague in Student Financial Services, our Director of Financial Aid, Mr. Bryan Gould. I'm going to turn it over to Bryan, who will share some remarks to frame our conversation, and then we'll respond to your questions. Good evening, Bryan.
Thanks, Robin. It's good to be with everyone this evening. Again, as Robin said, my name is Bryan Gould, and I serve as the Director of Financial Aid at Puget Sound. And I wanted to start off by kind of sharing with you the approach that we take to working with families when it comes to their financial aid package and the counseling that goes behind the financial aid package. We take a lot of pride at Puget Sound in being very invested in this process with families and with students. Financial literacy is something that we really promote through our office and in our connections with students and families. And so perhaps your interest in Puget Sound is one of a small kind of intimate college experience, and that's one that you should experience as well with Student Financial Services. We know that this is quite an investment, and we want to do the best that we can to ensure that you are experiencing the value of that investment and getting all of your questions answered and experiencing clarity when it comes to the financial aid process and the students' financial aid package over the 4-year span. I like to say this isn't a scenario where we admit a student and we provide them with a financial aid package with hopes that that first year will work for them. We're really looking for this to be a 4-year experience. We're looking to admit graduates of Puget Sound. And so that's what we intend to do as part of the enrollment division here within the financial aid unit and the greater Student Financial Services Department. And so I'm going to share my screen here to walk you through a few slides, but I recognize that your questions are probably most paramount when it comes to this webinar. And so I want to be sure and leave plenty of time for that. But before we get to those questions, I thought it would be helpful to just walk through some information for you that you can kind of absorb and distill a little bit prior to getting to those questions that I'm sure that you have. By now, all of you have received a financial aid package if you've been admitted to Puget Sound. Most of you should have received that electronically. All of you actually should have received that electronically through your admission portal, where we provide that in electronic format. We also follow up with a print brochure that typically comes a couple of weeks after that initial electronic release. And so my hope is that by now, many of you have already received that print brochure as well. If not, it's on its way. And if you have questions about that, we can certainly talk about that more in a few minutes. When looking at that financial aid package, you're going to see a number of components related to it. And the first I want to highlight is gift aid. Gift aid designates what we would consider scholarships or need-based grants. And so to summarize, gift aid is the good stuff as it relates to your financial aid, because that does not have to be repaid, nor does it have to be earned in the form of work. It is something that we provide to a student right out of the gate that is a gift to the student. Scholarship aid is generally merit or talent-based financial aid. And so you may very well have received an academic merit scholarship as part of your financial aid package, which came as a result of your admission application. Some of you may be applying for a music scholarship or an art or other talent scholarship, which would be qualified in that category. But in either case, a scholarship really is recognizing the merit or achievement of the student at the point of admission. You'll note there that I notated that it's renewable. That's a frequently asked question. Scholarships are indeed renewable over the 4 years that you're enrolled at Puget Sound, as long as you are maintaining a good academic progress as it relates to your grade point average and your completion of units that are attempted. Grants are another form of gift aid. Those are need-based, however, and so they may or may not be renewable based upon your financial circumstances year in and year out. Now, I will say that 85 to 90% of the time, the Puget Sound grant that a student is receiving at the point of admission is indeed renewable, because most of the time, family circumstances are fairly consistent from year to year. It's only in cases where perhaps your FAFSA results in year 3 are much different than they were in year 1, that you might experience some variability as it relates to a need-based grant. But for the most part, I would say that those are going to be renewable as well, as long as your financial circumstances remain consistent. Self-help aid, that's a very descriptive term, and I like it because oftentimes, families or students are wanting to know kind of more about loan offerings or perhaps work study. Self-help essentially is the student or family helping themselves as it relates to the financial aid that they're being offered. So of course, in the case of a loan, you are borrowing and you will be, of course, repaying that loan after graduation. And for those that qualify for work study, they may be working on campus 10 to 12 hours a week in order to earn the work study that was awarded to them in their financial aid package. As it relates to loans, of course, there are federal loan offers, private loan offers, and the same thing goes with work study, where that can come either from the federal or the state category. Last but not least, and I think most important for this point in your search, is outside scholarships. If I had a nickel for every time a student asks me in April, what more financial aid might they qualify for? It's interesting to note that March 31st tends to be the deadline for many outside scholarship organizations where students want to get in their application. And so now is a perfect time for you as a newly admitted student or family to be recognizing that there may be other aid out there that you want to seek. And it will require an application of some sort. I usually use the example of Kiwanis or Rotary, a local organization. Sometimes through the high school counseling office, they may have publications of opportunities. They're often local. but sometimes can account for $1,000 to $2,000 a year of financial aid that you otherwise wouldn't have, and that can go toward your bottom line. And so I really encourage students right now to be considering outside scholarship opportunities that can help to supplement what's been provided in the Puget Sound financial aid package. And you'll see I noted there, they're not likely renewable. And the reason for that is because they typically require an application each year. And so outside scholarships are unlike, gift aid or self-help, in that they're most likely not renewable, but could be reapplied for each and every year. For those that have applied for or still intend to apply for need-based aid, I just wanted to note that the FAFSA is still very much open and will remain open for the 2021-2022 academic year. I say that because sometimes, especially if you're a first-time family, you may not realize that the FAFSA is available and continues to be available. There's not a hard deadline on the FAFSA. And so if you're not sure if you should file, or perhaps you wished you would have and you don't realize that you still can, do keep in mind that the FAFSA is available. And we really encourage first-time families, especially if this is your first child going into college, that you file it unless you're absolutely certain that you're not interested in loans or perhaps a work offer. And the reason I say that is because need is a funny word. You could ask 5 people to qualify or define need, and you could get 5 very different answers. And so I always kind of like to default in encouraging a family to file the FAFSA, recognizing that if you end up deciding that it wasn't worth it, then you don't have to file it in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year. But you may be surprised at what you qualify for if you do file it in your first. And I've put some of the common questions here that we get asked that often relate to the FAFSA. One of them is, why wasn't my student offered a federal student loan? Well, that requires that the student file a FAFSA in order to qualify. And so that would be a reason to file the FAFSA above and beyond any need-based aid that the student would qualify for. The same thing goes for a federal parent loan, often referred to as a PLUS loan. If you haven't filed a FAFSA, then you're not going to be permitted to apply for a parent loan. And that means that you would only be available for like a private parent loan rather than a federally guaranteed parent loan. Work study is another. You have to file the FAFSA in order to determine whether you're eligible for work study. And the last question there regarding the FAFSA, should I consider filing it in the future, perhaps if you don't file it in your first year, or you could flip that around. I think what's most important to keep in mind is perhaps siblings. If this is your eldest child and there's a younger sibling that's a year or 2 behind them, then I would definitely consider filing a FAFSA when that younger sibling enters into college, because that could dramatically change your financial aid eligibility. And so it isn't necessarily a one and done kind of scenario. You may decide to apply in future years if you didn't your first. And it's just something to keep in mind that there are scenarios that might change your FAFSA results that could benefit you if indeed you decide to file it, whether now or sometime in the future. I mentioned just a moment ago, how do you define need? Well, the way that the FAFSA defines it and the way that we as a financial aid office are required to define it is as simple as this. It's our cost of attendance, which consists of a number of attributes: tuition, housing, meals, the student government fee. Those are all considered direct costs. And then in addition to that, we have indirect costs, such as personal expenses, travel to and from campus, books, things of that nature. All of that combined equals your cost of attendance, and that's what we use there on top. Your EFC is unique to you as a family, and so you as a family that filed the FAFSA would have an expected family contribution, and that of course is what we subtract from the cost of attendance, which then equals your financial need. And so if our cost of attendance is $70,000, just to use a round number, and your expected family contribution is $20,000, that means you have $50,000 of financial need at Puget Sound that we're trying to meet. We won't be able to meet need in all cases. I want to be clear about that. But that's the number we're looking to try and get at in order to meet a family's need. And you can see how different that's going to be from maybe a regional public institution where your cost of attendance might be there $30,000 or $25,000 and your EFC is $20,000. Well, there your need is going to be, $5,000 to $10,000 versus $50,000 at Puget Sound. And I guarantee you that the financial aid at Puget Sound is going to reflect somebody with much more need than, say, a financial aid package would at a public regional institution, just to use that as an example. And so again, need is kind of a funny or fuzzy word, and you just want to be clear about how it is articulated when it comes to determining the financial aid that you've received and how you go about interpreting that. Moving on, I've just got a couple of more slides. I just wanted to rest a moment in kind of where you are. Maybe I should have started by congratulating you. You've made it this far, which is quite a ways. I have a junior in high school right now, and so I'm very much in tune with kind of the process of seeking kind of admission. And you're here with a senior in high school that's been admitted to Puget Sound, and you're receiving a financial aid package, not just from Puget Sound, but I suspect from other colleges that you've applied to. And these are some of the things that I think are important that you consider as you unpack kind of these next few months. The first is, with all of your financial aid packages in front of you, assuming you're looking at like institutions, which of course at Puget Sound, that would be, independent, small liberal arts colleges, you want to compare to ensure that you're getting kind of a good kind of financial fit, as we might say, because not all private institutions are going to approach their financial aid programs in the same way. And certainly a public institution is going to look very different when it comes to your financial aid. So you want to kind of take a step back and really compare and best understand how Puget Sound fits you financially in making a decision for enrollment. You want to consider the proportion of gift aid versus the self-help that we talked about earlier. And then of course, parent loans. It's a bit of a pet peeve for me when I see a parent loan packaged in a financial aid award so that it suggests that perhaps there's no cost to attend, or there's a very low cost to attend, when the family then realizes, well, actually, it's just a big parent loan that they've put in there that's taking care of a majority of my out-of-pocket. We do reference in our financial aid package what you're eligible to borrow in a PLUS loan, but we really strive to be transparent in making sure you understand what the true out-of-pocket is going to be, say, on your billing statement, if you decide to deposit. And so be wary of parent loans being packaged in the financial aid award. Monthly budgeting. I mentioned I have a junior in high school, and we've kind of started to think about what we could afford out of pocket when the time comes. And I can't underscore enough that if you're not already doing it, sitting down, one Saturday morning a month and kind of, writing out your monthly budget really helps illuminate the funds that you may have that you don't realize you have. I'm spending a lot of money each month on activities that my children are involved in, especially pre-pandemic. But all the things that we're spending on our children while they're in the house can help to supplement what we may be spending on our children when they're living on campus somewhere. And I say that not to make it sound easy, because I know it isn't. But I say that because that can help offset loan borrowing that you otherwise might just sign up for, and can kind of help illuminate, a monthly budget of, say, $1,000, of course, equals $12,000 a year that you might not have recognized you have once your child is to move and you're paying for them to live on campus rather than to live in your household. And it's just something to consider as you kind of start crossing your T's and dotting your I's to make this happen. And then last but not least, if you believe your FAFSA doesn't represent your true circumstances, there is a process called professional judgment or special circumstances. It's kind of language that's familiar to the financial aid world. It might be the first time you've heard it. But if your FAFSA results are dramatically different than your true circumstances this year, then you can consider completing a special circumstance request where our financial aid team will review and make a determination as to whether we can adjust your FAFSA to reality. A good example of that is the FAFSA is reading prior year information, which is 2 years prior to fall 21. That would be your 2019 tax return. And things might be very different for you now than they were in 2019 when it comes to, say, income. Well, that would be something we'd like to hear about to ensure that we're providing you the most fair financial aid package when it comes to your real circumstances and not what your circumstances were, say, 2 years ago, which is what the FAFSA is asking for. And so I can talk more about that in the days to come or here if you have questions, but I wanted to make sure you are familiar with that process. Last but not least, this is my last slide, and then we can get to your questions. And I feel like we're right on time there. This is a sample financial aid package. Of course, I've crossed out the name and any other identification information, but this might be kind of the most important part of the session because you have one of these in front of you. Yours is 2021, 2022, and so this is a year outdated. But for the sake of this exercise, I think it's just fine. You see there kind of some information that I want to walk you through just so that you can get a personalized tour through your financial aid package. Now, not everyone's award looks like this. And so, spoiler alert, this is just one financial aid package of many. And not all financial aid packages are the same. But I want to first start off by saying this student clearly filed the FAFSA because they have some need-based grant as well as loan and work study. You'll see in the top right, direct costs. Again, those are tuition, student government fee, housing, and meals. And so those are things that we would bill you prior to financial aid being applied. And so our direct costs for last year were $67,280. And so we take that, and you'll see that goes down in the direct cost box. The top section there, scholarships and grants, that's the academic merit scholarship, the Puget Sound scholarship, which is an additional scholarship, as well as need-based Puget Sound grant. That all adds up to $37,900, and so we plug that into the gift aid box. From there, you'll see loans that were offered, a subsidized and unsubsidized loan. $5,500 is the total max that a first-year student can borrow, and so we offer that, and we place that in the loan box, and then you'll see the difference equals an estimated annual bill for this family of $23,880. And that would be for the year. So divided in half would be half for fall, half for spring. So that's kind of how you would want to interpret your financial aid, looking at gift aid and loans. Now, of course, if a family or student decides to decline their loan, then you want to add $5,500 to that estimated annual bill. And that's easy to interpret, what the cost would then be if the student was to decline their loans. You'll see that work study is not included in the estimated annual bill. And the reason for that is because you have to earn your work study. That's not something that we give to you as a grant. That's something that students earn as they go. And so working, 10 to 12 hours a week while enrolled would equal a paycheck that the student would receive each month that they would put into their pocket and use for, personal expenses or things of that nature. And so it is considered financial aid because it's intended to go towards your cost of attendance, but it's not going towards your bill. And so that's a frequently asked question from families is, where's my work study getting calculated? It's not in the bottom line because, again, it's going directly to the student. You'll see down there, lastly, the option to borrow a parent loan. I mentioned that earlier. So this family is eligible to borrow a PLUS loan in the amount of their out of pocket. And so basically you take the cost of attendance minus the financial aid package that the student was awarded. And that's essentially the amount that you could borrow in a PLUS loan. Now, hold the phone. I don't encourage you to do that, only if you have to. You can borrow less than that. You can borrow no PLUS loan, but we provide that to you just as a kind of sample as to what's possible if you felt the need to borrow in order to cover some or all of your out of pocket to the college as part of your enrollment. There are a few things to mention when it comes to payments. I mentioned earlier that monthly budget and kind of thinking about what you might be able to scratch per month to send to the college. We do have a monthly payment plan. And so, if you're being asked to pay, $12,000 a semester, $11,500 a semester, you can divide that among 5 monthly payments, interest-free, throughout that particular semester. There's an $80 service fee in order to do that, but otherwise it's a free payment plan that you can take advantage of to help kind of manage the costs and break them down into something more monthly. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share to get us started. I think I probably took maybe 15 or 20 minutes to get us started, and hopefully I've kind of gotten you ready with some questions. I don't know, Robin, if you have any coming in, but I'm more than happy to start answering them if you do.
Yes, we do. I'm actually going to handle these a little out of order because one is a nice segue from where we were. It's a question about what exactly a Parent Plus loan is and what that process looks like.
Yeah, great. So the federal government provides the opportunity for parents to borrow a federally guaranteed loan, just like the federal student loan is a federally guaranteed loan, same as the Parent Plus loan. It's a federal loan that's literally being funded through the U.S. Treasury, but it's in the name of the parent rather than of the student. And so for families that have filed the FAFSA, the parent is eligible to apply for a plus loan. There is a credit evaluation, and so the parent does have to pass a fairly simple credit check in order to be eligible. But assuming they are eligible, they're permitted to borrow a federal plus loan or parent loan, much like the student is eligible to borrow a federal student loan. The purpose is, of course, to cover the parent's out of pocket or the parent's contribution, which is why I say you can borrow up to the difference between our costs and your award, but you don't have to. I sometimes hear from families, they're like, Bryan, you're asking us to pay $25,000 and we have 18. Well, they may choose to borrow a $7,000 plus loan then in order to kind of help make up the difference, when it comes to that. The loan comes directly to the college, and so you don't have to do the processing of it. It basically comes directly to the college and goes against the student's bill. And then repayment will begin shortly thereafter disbursement, although I believe that now, plus loans, there may be a deferment period for a Parent Plus loan that didn't used to exist. But for most families, much like any other market-based loan that they would take advantage of, you could start making payments on it typically 6 months after that loan has dispersed. The interest tends to be, I think, fairly reasonable. I mean, you can certainly shop, the marketplace. I mean, some parents say, I've got a local credit union that can beat that plus loan. Well, amen. Take advantage of that. I mean, we're not here to push a plus loan versus a private loan. It's just an option that families can take advantage of.
Great, thank you. Next question is pretty specific. I'm going to ask a general question, and that one is part of it. So can you speak a little bit about merit scholarship renewability? So what the process is for renewing a merit scholarship? And then the question that came in is, if you have an episode of illness, for example, and your GPA is lower than expected for 1 year or one semester, will it mean you could lose your merit aid the next year?
Good question. The best way to answer it is to reinforce to students and families that we want them here and that we recognize that their financial aid is a part of them staying here and being here. And so we try not to be too heavy-handed when it comes to, renewability. That being said, there are standards that we want students to meet in order to be successful. And so we have something called satisfactory academic progress, which we review each and every semester. As long as the student is earning a 2.0 grade point average cumulative, and they're earning 75% of the units that they're taking each and every semester, meaning you're not registering for a bunch of classes and then dropping half of them. It's just basically persistence is important. As long as you're meeting that fairly modest bar, you're going to have your scholarship renewed. There's nothing that you need to do in order to apply for it to be renewed. It just gets renewed automatically. And if it's not going to get renewed, you'll hear from us as to why, and we'll provide you with an opportunity to appeal and stay. And so it's a very rare circumstance that I think a student finds themselves in a position where they're trying to continue enrollment, but they don't have access to their merit scholarship. Usually it's far prior to that, they may find themselves, not enrolled for another reason. And so it's usually not going to be because of your merit scholarship not being renewed. But satisfactory academic progress is really what we hang our hat on when it comes to assessing that renewability.
Yeah, thank you, Bryan. Thank you. The next question is about the GET program. So a family would like to use the GET dollars toward payment of the first year. How does that work? How can you set that up?
Yeah, so the guaranteed tuition program is something that we do take advantage of. And it's a little different though, because as a private institution, we're less involved with the rates that students got in on. So for example, with the GET program, my understanding is you're buying units at the rate that is, say, the University of Washington's rate, or the large public rate here in state. And so as a non-public institution, we're not going to be kind of as involved with the math, I guess, there. What we're going to do is allow you to use the credits that you've earned as part of the GET program and really kind of treat it as more of a 529 program, where whatever units that you've earned and have access to, you can make use of and send to Puget Sound rather than send to the University of Washington or Washington State. And so you still are able to make use of your GET units at Puget Sound. It just may or may not be at the rate that you were expecting if you got into it assuming you were going to, say, University of Washington, if that makes sense. So it's going to be unique on a case by case, but you haven't invested in vain as it relates to the GET program. You're still very much able to take use of that. And we would be happy to work with each family with questions on a case by case basis, when it comes time to make payment and how to direct those funds to us specifically.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Bryan. The next question, we've actually gotten a few questions about this, so I'll paraphrase or kind of bring them together a little bit, but there's understandably a lot of interest in the university's plans for the fall. It's a great question. I'm sure it's front of mind for pretty much everybody in this session. For context, for fall semester 2020, Puget Sound went fully remote for our instruction. Then for spring 2021, that's the current semester, we returned to in-person with a mix of classes that are fully in-person, hybrid, or remote. Now, the safety of our students, staff, and faculty is obviously paramount. We have to follow and will follow the guidance of state and local authorities. However, I do think there's good reason for optimism as we prepare for next year. So our academic and student life offices are actively planning for an in-person experience in the fall with as little reliance on remote or hybrid classes as possible. So I think there's good reason to believe the fall semester is going to feel much more like a normal in-person experience, which I think is good news for all of us. Next question, what is the financial health of the university, especially as it relates to the pandemic? I can start, Bryan, and if you have additional thoughts. University of Puget Sound is pretty conservatively invested financially. So back in 2008, when with the Great Recession, yes, our endowment took a hit at that time, but not nearly as large a hit as many institutions of higher education. So I think there's a good financial foundation at this college to weather these kinds of storms financially. Like all colleges, we again have taken a hit during this time financially, but everything I see from how we're approaching planning to the future to how we're providing services for students at this time suggests that we're not in crisis financially. Bryan, do you have anything to add?
No, I would agree 100%. And I guess the only thing I would add is with colleagues across the country in higher education, I'm able to kind of use that as a bit of a thermometer when it comes to kind of where we might be in relation to others. And in that way, I feel very comfortable. And I think that financially we're quite strong, all things considered, due to, I think, the work of our administration over the years and kind of the planning that has been done over the years for such an unfortunate circumstances that we find ourselves. I think things are quite strong at Puget Sound, and I sleep good at night knowing that myself.
Other questions, and I know our team is busy in the background answering those.
It is hard not to see everyone. I must say, I wish we were in an auditorium. I wish we were in an auditorium together. It's just Robin and I staring at one another.
Bryan, here's a good one that I think will be broadly applicable. Can you give an estimate for cost of housing and food off campus for future years, and maybe how that compares to on campus?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's somewhat hard to answer because it really depends so much on the lifestyle of the student. And I say that smiling because I was a college student once, and I remember living with, 6 or 7 other people, 2 to a bedroom, and eating soup and ramen. That's going to be a lot less expensive than living, say, in a single room on campus and having a large meal plan. I think the standard, though, we kind of base our cost of attendance on our on-campus cost. And so housing and meals on campus is, somewhere in the $13,000 to $14,000 range per year. And I would say if you were living like in a 1 or 2 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, I'd say our on-campus is probably fairly comparable to the Tacoma market when it comes to kind of that standard. It's only insofar as it's like, well, I'm going to live with a lot more people. Of course, your rent's going to go down as a relation to that, and your eating habits and so forth will too. But if you were to kind of ask me for a definitive answer, I would say it's fairly comparable, that living on campus with a meal plan isn't going to be dramatically more than living off campus. And I say that because we often entertain appeals. Students will appeal their housing and asking to live off campus. And part of what Residence Life will do is require them to do kind of a competitive analysis on where it is they intend to live and to really see the difference. And oftentimes, they do see that there's not as much of a difference as they thought, or they're having to pay a month, say in December, that, where they may be at home for the holidays, so to speak, or during the summer, you sign a 12-month lease, but you plan not to be in Tacoma during the summer. Those are factors that you also want to take into consideration when comparing cost.
Great, thank you. We also have a question here about student loans. Are they a one-time thing, or are they guaranteed for all 4 years?
They are guaranteed for all 4 years as long as you file a FAFSA each and every year. And so that's why you file it each year, so that you can be offered student loan. Student loan offers do increase subtly from year to year. So for a first-year student, first time in college, that's a $5,500 limit. For a second year, it's a $6,500 limit. And then for the junior and senior year, it's a $7,500 limit per year. And so if you add all of that up, you're talking, I think it's 27,000 over 4 years that would be offered in the form of a student loan. And so the question is, yes, they're renewable. I do want to point out, though, that just because you're offered the loan doesn't mean you have to accept it. And if you choose to reject the loan, it's as if you never borrowed it. Sometimes families get really concerned because they see a loan on their student's financial aid package and they don't want it. That's totally cool. There are ways that you can reject it yourself once you've deposited. So you can't reject it yet because we're waiting until you deposit to determine whether you're actually enrolling or not. But if you are enrolling, you can certainly reject the loan, and it's as if you never were offered it. And so that's something to keep in mind and not to get too anxious about.
Great. Great. Related to that, there's a question. What advice can you give about obtaining private student loans?
So private student loans, you'll want to, we've got on our website, we do have kind of some limited options. We do host a kind of a tutorial for students that want to borrow a private loan where they're to go there, and there's kind of an entrance counseling component to that process. But essentially you're given a half dozen or so lenders that you can pick from. That doesn't mean that we want you to pick them or that we're encouraging you to pick them. It's just they're lenders that our students over the years have worked with, and so we provide them as options. But students can borrow from a local credit union. It's really up to the student or family to determine who their lender is going to be in the form of a private loan, whether it's Wells Fargo or a local credit union or anywhere in between. And then they just work with us directly to say, Brian, we've been approved for a private loan in the amount of X, and then we'll put that on their award, and then the funding will get directed to us so that it goes to their bill or against their account. And so it's a fairly it's not as, I'll be honest, it's not as streamlined as you accepting a federal student loan, but you're totally entitled to decline a federal loan and take a private student loan if you wish to. I would just encourage families to make sure that they understand the terms of that loan, because to the extent that the terms are variable or things aren't quite as clear, that's the one thing about a federal student loan is kind of the security in that it is what it is and it always will be, versus like a private loan where you want to make sure you're a more savvy consumer in getting the best kind of outcome with a private borrower or lender rather.
Another good question here. What exactly is Puget Sound Grant Aid?
So Puget Sound Grant Aid is gift aid. Just like on my slide, you noted that both scholarships and gift aid were under the same category, or rather scholarships and grant were under the same category. And I'm just going to be really simple here. It's institutional money is what it is. And so it's coming from kind of the same bucket of funds, if you will, when it comes to how we're funding that financial aid. So much like a merit scholarship is institutional money, a Puget Sound grant is institutional money, and it's no different other than the fact that it's need-based. And so in order to get a Puget Sound grant, you had to have filed a FAFSA, and you had to demonstrate need after your merit scholarship was applied. So if you filed a FAFSA and your need was $20,000 and you got a $20,000 merit scholarship, well, then your need has been met by that merit scholarship, and so you wouldn't have Puget Sound grant. Whereas if your need was $40,000 and you got a $20,000 scholarship, more likely you then have a Puget Sound grant to kind of help get a little bit more mileage, if you will, out of the institutional aid that we're offering, because we want to do everything that we can to make Puget Sound affordable, but we recognize that in some cases we may fall short in meeting need. But that's essentially what that Puget Sound grant is. It's our attempt to try and meet more of your need with institutional aid.
Great. Yeah. And another good question here, how long are merit scholarships good for? 4 years, 5 years?
They're good for 5 years or 10 semesters is how we would define that. I think most students, don't need that much time. I mean, we kind of provide a little buffer there in case there's a need for an extra semester to double major or to kind of graduate. But, the overwhelming majority of our students are graduating in 4 years, and so that's all they need. But if necessary, it is eligible for 10 semesters or 5-year period.
Great. Now, what about study abroad? How does studying abroad impact financial aid and more specifically merit scholarships?
So for study abroad, other than the personal expenses that may go into studying abroad, I studied abroad when I was in college, and I spent more than my standard semester allocation on personal expenses, so to speak. But from a tuition, housing, meals, kind of your direct costs that we talked about earlier, we're going to charge you direct costs just like you're on campus for you to go abroad. And you're going to be eligible for your financial aid just as if you were on campus in order to go abroad. And so essentially, for the sake of argument, it's kind of a wash. Now, full disclosure is there are some fees associated with specific programs that are relative to this one versus that one. And so I don't want you to get the impression that, that everything equals the same, but as it relates to your costs and your aid, it's as if you were on campus. And you do want to take into account perhaps some additional fees that might relate to travel and things of that nature. But otherwise, I think people are very satisfied to hear that their study abroad is going to kind of equal a semester as if they were on campus when it comes to their financial aid.
Watching the questions very carefully. I see our team very, very busy in the background answering quite a bit.
Thank you, team.
Happy all the questions are getting answered. We've got one here. Oh, this is good. We were talking about on-campus housing versus off-campus housing. And there's a great question here about living on campus versus off campus and when that's possible. And this is a really good point for all students. University of Puget Sound has a 2-year live-on requirement. As I sort of alluded to in the beginning, being part of this community is an essential piece of the education. So we do require that all students live on campus for at least 2 years. And then they have the option to move off campus after that. So as a junior or senior, students can move off campus. It's certainly not required. You can live on campus for all 4 years. We do not have a situation where we're running out of housing, in part because we have designated housing options on campus for first-year students, and then different housing options for students in their second, third, and fourth year. So I think it's about, when there isn't a global pandemic happening, it's about 70% of the student body at any one time is living on campus, 30% is living off campus. For students who live off campus, the culture is not a commuter campus culture. Students tend to live within 3 to 5 blocks of the school for the most part. So, still coming and going from campus very, very easily and still having that residential experience as part of it.
Robin, I was going to say too, when it comes to living off campus, if you happen to have financial aid that exceeds tuition and would normally go towards your room or your meals, you live off campus, we still assume that kind of on-campus budget as what your need would be for a year. And so just so families realize that, some students, not all, but some get a refund from us in order to use some of that aid to pay rent or to pay for groceries and things of that nature. Now, again, that's not going to be across the board, but for families with high need that have high financial aid packages, it's not like your aid goes away just because you live off campus. Your aid can still go to contribute towards rent and meals, as a refund to the student when they're not living on campus, because you don't have a room charge, you still have rent to pay. And so that's something to keep in mind in how we kind of work with students year in and year out to make sure we've got all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted there.
Yeah, great. There's a question in here about housing for the fall and how full will the residence halls be? What will that look like? We have students living on campus this spring, so we have spread students out in our residence options because certainly thinking about density of the number of people in a residence hall, that's from a COVID perspective something that we want to pay attention to. But we have students on campus right now. Again, we are planning for that in-person experience in the fall. We believe we have the facilities to do that. There's a question here about meal plans for off-campus students. I can answer that one as well. Yes, there are definitely meal plans for off-campus students. that are just smaller in size, with the assumption that being for those students who are living off campus in their junior or senior year, that they won't do as many meals on campus. But I think that's a great option, and one that I took advantage of back in the day. It looks like the questions are trickling off. We will stay here in this space and answer what's come in the interim. But I think we're going to wrap up the live broadcast session of this evening. So thank you everyone for coming. If I could just say one thing in conclusion, it would be that we are here to help. We like to offer this kind of event where we can offer information broadly, but we know that everyone experiences this differently. You may have questions that are very specific to you or your family's circumstance. Please get in touch with your admission counselor or your financial aid counselor. We want to make sure that you have all the information you need to make an informed and confident decision when you go to school. So if we can help, please do so. Remember the spotlight events over the course of the spring to help you to get to know this place better. And that if you are able to come to campus for an in-person visit, you can register for that at pugetsound.edu/visit. Thank you so much for coming, and have a wonderful evening. And remember, this session has been recorded and is available. Thank you, Bryan.
Good night.